Auckland business person, business director, former diplomat, owner of just about everything, or at least he's had his pie in something his entire life, and commercial leader of New Zealand, Craig Stobo, joins us for the new year. Welcome to the show. Good afternoon to you, Craig.
Hi, Stephen. Greetings. How are you?
I'm very well. Where are we today?
I'm in Auckland today. Had been down south for Christmas and New Year, but no, back in the saddle and enjoying this wonderful run of summer weather in Auckland, finally.
You are originally an Oamaru boy, aren't you? You went to Waitaki Boys High School.
That's right, I was.
And you left Oamaru, I guess, at the end of the 7th form, and you've never been back, is that right?
Oh, no, I'm still involved as a chairman of the Waitaki Boys High School Foundation, which is an endowment fund. So while I don't get down there every meeting, sometimes it's a Zoom meeting, I do try and get down for those meetings. So I do go through Oamaru from time to time. Actually,
just on that, and just before I get on, we both have associations, I should explain, through Waitaki Boys High School. Craig, because he went to school there, and my father was the rector there. They've had some trouble in the last 10 years.
They had some commissioners in to help run the school for a few years, but recently they've held normal elections for trustees, and the school is in good shape with a very good rector who came from Kings in Dunedin. Yeah, and he's doing a really good job. Daryl, doing a great job.
Yeah. And King's a great school in Dunedin, wonderful school. In fact, we were just talking about Cambridge in the previous hour, but they are one of the schools, I think they're the only school, in actual fact, in Dunedin that offers Cambridge examinations, Craig.
Right, yeah. Well, there is a move away from NCA, as you appreciate. It's enormously complicated to explain NCA, whereas Cambridge or baccalaureate is worldwide and accepted and understood. So if you wanted, certainty and of where your education's at, those external exams are, in my view, far superior than NCA.
Now, as you also know, my son is now at boarding school at St Kevin's in Oamaru. He's got introduced this year, or last year, Craig, to the blood match. Was it as big then when you were at school, 40 years ago? Yes,
except St Kevin's was an all-boys school, of course. Now it's mixed. But yes, no, it's a great rivalry. Not as great a rivalry as Timaru versus Waitaki Boys, which I think is the oldest continuous inter-school fixture in New Zealand. Some schools started earlier, but they broke for World War II, whereas Timaru and Waitaki played all the way through. So it is the oldest continuous rivalry. But as a local derby, definitely St Kevin's and Waitaki Boys is an annual fixture that's highly looked forward to.
Well, I was amazed. They had 2,500 people at the game at Centennial Park. They now play it on a neutral venue because they've had lots of problems in the past with going to the school of the other and having it vandalised by the supporters of the other side.
That's right. Very Harry Potterish.
Yes, actually, it's a good analogy, actually. I'm just being told Te Iki a Maui is the name for the Te Ika a Maui. Maui, for the North Island, You knew that, didn't you?
And Te Wai Pounamu for South Island.
That's right, yep. Now, okay, moving on. This year... I'm interested in where you see New Zealand commercially, economically, over the next 12 months, Craig, and what you anticipate over the next wee while.
Yes, let's just start with the big picture and talk about starting with Trump and his election in the Iowa caucuses, where he got 51% of the votes, which gives him 20 delegates out of 40 to go to the National Convention in Milwaukee in July. He's got to get a lot more, obviously. He's got to get 1,215 delegates, so 20 is not much, but he started. But what was important to understand, that was the highest margin for a Republican nominee ahead of the second place getter DeSantis, a record margin. So you then look at what are his policies, because they impact on us, and so his policies are, broadly speaking, seal the border. Okay, so it's an immigration story again. It's slash quote-unquote taxes. and that appeals to, cost of living issues. Mm-hmm. And thirdly is to end the wars in Israel and Ukraine. How he does that, I don't know. But the sort of takeout for us is slashing taxes without cutting defence or cutting entitlements just goes to a higher debt requirement for the US government. And your listeners may not know, but global debt issued by governments worldwide climbed to $97 trillion US in 2023, which is a 40% increase since 2019. So that's enormous funding that's happened that, of course, has to be paid back. And that just means, as is the case for New Zealand, the interest costs on that, when interest rates are where they are, is a opportunity cost of not having those resources available for education or health or whatever. So when I see that, I get the politics of it, but the economics are challenging as to how that US government's going to fund what could be a substantial deficit if Trump gets in and slashes taxes.
I'm interested, though, in the way you're thinking, Craig, because you're talking like he's going to get elected. And I reckon I've already made that prediction that we'll be dealing with the real President Trump at the end of this year.
Yeah, how he does that with, litigation that's in front of him on several fronts, I don't know how that works. But at the moment, on the politics, it's pretty strong. So
if he gets elected, you realise that he can actually excuse himself.
Because he's the president.
Exactly. Yeah. So he can call him. He can immediately end every case against him just by the law, and he will. And I think he has actually said, "I'm going to." Yeah.
Now this sort of has implications for us. Another front, which is you might have seen the tweet from Winston Peters, because he's using or X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, rather than mainstream media, to release points of interest on foreign affairs. So announcing getting closer to the US, or at least being interested in getting closer to UK, Australia, US on AUKUS. Why we want to be involved in a tripartite arrangement, which at its essence is arranging for submarines to be built for Australia. Why we don't want to do that, why we want to do that, I don't know. But the point is we're getting closer to that Western alliance and less close to China. So a more strident US has implications for how we position ourselves with the US. So there's another sort of consequence of Trump being elected. But the other thing that's of importance is this year there's lots of elections around the world, not just the US, but also India and Pakistan, and we seem to be wanting to get closer to India with a business delegation going to India potentially with our Prime Minister Lux. And of course the Taiwanese have just held their elections, which has been a vote for more independence from China. So the world is sort of becoming a little bit clearer around where people are positioning themselves in foreign affairs and trade terms.
Yeah, carry on.
I was just going to say, that Hertz comment you made earlier, I was going to actually talk about that, and I'm glad you raised it kind of serendipitously. So the facts are that Hertz have announced they wish to sell 20,000 EVs, which is a third of their EV fleet, and move back to petrol-powered vehicles. And that was due to weak demand by consumers. So consumers aren't taking up those EV rentals, and that may be just because of the costs, the cost of renting, much higher than a petrol vehicle, but also the repair costs. And I was interested in trying to understand locally, what is the cost of repairing a damaged, say, Tesla EV, and are the cost of repairs much higher? And I just ran AMI out of interest. I use AMI myself for my car insurance, and they gave me a quote for a $66,000 or $67,000 Model 3 Tesla premium. And then I just sort of understood that in general terms, the insurance premiums for electric vehicles are higher than standard vehicles. So there is another running cost element to owning an electric car. But I don't know, what the actual cost differences are on a repair job with an EV, and particularly if it affects the battery and the electrics. I don't know, but I thought that was insightful that Hertz is doing that, and whether others follow. So the public take-up of EVs may not be as strong as we think.
Well, just on that, because I know you're interested in these sorts of issues, Craig. The road use charges now are getting applied to hybrids and EVs as well, so that's been confirmed by Transport Minister Simeon Brown. But also the ute tax is gone, so that advantage that you get from purchasing an electric vehicle and a hybrid are gone as well too.
The cost is it's $76 per 1,000 kilometres is the charge coming on 1 April.
Yeah, so I would imagine that the impact of that means that if I was driven by economic considerations to purchase an EV, I'm probably having those taken away from me. But I'm also assuming that when I see people driving EVs, and they are expensive anyhow because you've got to purchase them new, that people make a decision to purchase an EV based not upon necessarily economic or financial means, but because of sort of worldview, or because it seems a good idea or it's fashionable or whatever. You purchase a new car, it seems to be, no one purchases a new car for financial reasons, do they?
Oh, I think that is part of the decision, but brand identity or virtue signalling, whatever you want to call it, is pretty powerful. It's very powerful.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yes, yeah.
Until you have to come to power them up en route between Wellington and Auckland, and you've got to find a charging station, and someone's already there with their chargers on, and you actually don't know, because no one's there, they've walked away to get a cup of tea or something, you don't know how long the car's going to take to recharge. So the system, the infrastructure to support EVs out of your immediate environment, certainly on the main trunk route, is challenging. So, I'm not sure we'll get as strong a take-up now that the costs are coming through on RUCs and the discounts changed, and possibly the premiums in a cost of living crisis are clearly higher than a petrol car. I think the other thing, just on that whole sort of electricity theme,